It's the relinquishing control, which we've talked about on here's our agenda, here's our schedule, here's our priorities, and saying, okay, but wait a minute. God, let's make sure they are your priorities and agenda. And ladies and gentlemen, we are back after a small hiatus for July 4th break.
Ooh, hiatus.
And then some of us were traveling out of the country. Thank you. Thank you. I learned my vocabulary grew recently.
How well are you holding down the Spanish language now? Are you fluent?
Well, ¿Dónde está Maria? Maria es en biblioteca, mi amigo.
She's still in the biblioteca.
She's always in the library. You know, I talked about this with our team. Is it possible Maria, in all these Spanish books, she's been the librarian?
You heard it here, folks.
Mind blown. Have you thought about that before?
I am now. I'm thinking about it all the time now.
You are. Yeah. She is probably the librarian. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, if you go study Spanish, I think anywhere in America, some of the early textbooks, I'm not making this up. You're looking at me like I'm making this up. Chris does not believe what I'm about to say.
I fully believe in what you're saying.
A lot of the textbooks will use the example when you're learning Spanish, ¿Dónde está Maria? So where is Maria? And
she's the librarian.
Maria es en biblioteca. Yeah. She doesn't say librarian. Don't be silly. Maria es en biblioteca, which means
she's the bibliotechnician.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. Stay strong, Maria.
Maria is in the library. So, yes, we recently traveled to Honduras, me and 15 other people. So we took a little NQT break, but we are back with fresh content, cutting edge content, some would call it.
We are cutting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Brand new.
I wasn't aware that it's going to be
Chris is really not
let's
excited to be back. I think he wants another week off.
I'm glad to be here, Mike.
There we are.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes. How have you been feeling lately? Besides watching the All-Star break and stuff like that on baseball.
I've been feeling strong to quite strong.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Feeling strong?
Yeah.
You, if you had a cheese lately?
You feeling strong, my friend?
This obsession with cheese, Mike. We gotta nail this down. We gotta find out what's behind
that. I think it's Seinfeld's fault because of the Summer of George and the references.
The picture of George in the swim trunks.
I can't, for some reason, there's always a guy with freedom laying on the couch eating a block of cheese. I don't know why. Yeah. I can't make this stuff up. It's in my head. What do you want me to say? I gotta say it. If I don't say it, I'm not true to myself.
Stay true.
Don't you want me to talk about what's floating around in my head right now?
Do that. Keep doing that. Don't mind me. I'm just going to push back a little at times.
Please do. Please, always feel free to push back. So good week for you over the last week.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, nothing to complain about.
Did you go out of town for the 4th or watch fireworks anywhere?
We watched fireworks from an unexpected place. There was a little warehouse part of where I live that if you found the right spot to park, you could see the fireworks there.
A warehouse spot? Did you go on the roof?
No, actually, it was just parked between some warehouse buildings. Perfect location to see fireworks displayed.
How'd you find that location? Like the dark web was talking about the city you live in and where to go.
I'd prefer you don't bring that up.
We won't tell anyone the location because that's going to get blown out.
Why don't you just hang out with us on July 4th next time and you can see some fireworks through some warehouse buildings and be okay with it.
I'm trying to think what we did. We were at a pool party at my brother's place for the 4th, which is great. And then our neighborhood does so many fireworks. It's like a city.
Amateur fireworks?
Yes. I'm going to say the level. I'm going to say on a serious, it is a step above amateur.
Okay.
It is
kind of scary.
Intense for not exactly what a city would do, but not incredibly, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
It's pretty close. It's
all this is legal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100% legal.
Okay.
Everything's legal. This is not financial advice. And what other clauses do we need to say?
I don't know.
100% legal. If any lawyers listening, this episode is brought to you by legal.
So you're telling me you enjoyed some illegal
firework activity? I said I enjoyed fireworks.
Oh.
I enjoyed fireworks.
Okay.
That's all I said. We should move on.
Let's move on.
Let's move on from a copyright perspective. So we also went on a mission trip, us as a family, with 4 other families went to Honduras.
I feel like you're showboating right now.
Just got back. I mean, what have you done with your life?
Yeah,
I mean, we
just
saw
watched some fireworks through our house, and we're traveling to do the Lord's work.
We saw fireworks without having to get up from the couch while we ate cheese, and then we left the country. And you went to a warehouse, and that's all you've done.
That's all. That's all I'm going to admit to.
No. We recently got back a couple days ago, and it was a great trip. Lots of processing, from that trip. But it was a really, really good experience for everyone, including the kids. It was their first time to ever go.
So you took the kids.
Mm-hmm.
You had your wife there as
My
well.
wife, she was there.
Wife and kids serving together on a mission trip.
Yep.
Would you? That sounds right there, perfectly in your comfort zone, right?
Oh man, no, it was no. I don't know about you, but no, going to it's a third world country, right? Because we're in first world land. Is that how that works?
I'd say we're in top tier.
I get those confused.
The Premier League of
sometimes
countries.
I get them backwards. Is Honduras considered a third world country? What's a third world country? Like poverty, lots of poverty, things like that.
We can find a definition, but
okay,
but usually they're not doing as well economically.
We might put that in the show notes, so it may or may not be in there. But anyway, no, traveling for 7 or 8 days to a country where
you traveled for 7 or 8 days.
No,
I was gonna say Honduras is a 3-hour flight, but
I didn't realize the whole episode's under a microscope.
No, you're taking a boat.
The criticism is strong from Mr. Warehouse over there.
Hey, people want to know.
No. Short travel from where we are in Texas to down there, handful of hours, whether you do 1, 2 planes, whatever. No, but being in an area, there's no AC. I don't know if you know this about me, but sometimes I tend to sweat, a little bit of sweater, or run a little hot sometimes.
It's to be expected.
I could be sweating right now. But no AC, a lot of comforts. I'm just listing off some comforts here. This wasn't the priority, so please hear me when I say that. No AC. The plumbing is kind of weaker in a lot of countries around the world. You can't flush toilet paper. You can't do anything like that. The water's not safe to drink. You got to have bottled water. There's bugs, flies, all that stuff everywhere. Again, more normal all around the world versus the U.S. The U.S., for those of you who may have traveled outside of the country before, we're really more the minority of the world. But it's hard to know that without leaving, right? Because you just think everywhere is like this. So doing that with kids and every family having kids, no, I would say, if you were to ask the team, were you comfortable? I think you'd get 100% success rate on everyone saying they were uncomfortable. But that can be a good thing.
Yeah. So what I hear there, you kind of lead off with the discomforts that are primarily physical, right?
Yeah.
No AC, flies buzzing around you.
Yeah. They're really surfacey.
No place to put the paper.
No, you got to throw away that paper.
Got to throw away the paper. That's always fun.
Mm-hmm.
So what about mentally? Were comfortable mentally? Because we're going to talk about that, and then spiritually too. So
is that what we're talking about today?
I think we need to touch on that, because you mentioned the physical.
Yeah.
But comfortability.
Is that a word?
Comfortability.
Get your words right, man.
Were you comfortable mentally and spiritually?
So if that's what we're talking about today, comfort and uncomfortableness, it sounds like that's what we're talking about today. Segue a la Chris Howard, co-host Chris. So I would say, we prepped. It's not my first time out of the country. I've done it a handful of times. It's first time with my family, first time for our kids. We prepped as a team. We prayed. We've done a lot of devotionals, and felt prepared going in. And then, a lot of things, you have to treat every trip, honestly, all of our days like this, but especially on a mission trip, you kind of show up, in my opinion, with open hands. And you go, okay, here's our plan. But it's very possible 100% of our plans are not going to work out at all. And you're going to pivot. You're going to pivot a million different times, right? That would be a good sound effect to have. Pivot, by the way. We need to get that on there. Pivot. So I think we were prepared. But no, uncomfortable in a lot of different ways. What are we doing exactly? And what are we going to do if this happens? And what if our kids are falling apart? And that actually did happen. So along the way, finding different levels of being stretched, not just physically, but being stretched mentally, physically, emotionally, seeing people and a lot of the world live in ways that you're just not accustomed to seeing up close, So a lot of uncomfort.
Yeah. So across at least 3 different areas there: physical, mental, spiritual. You do the preparation for it.
Yeah.
The physical, you're not going to really know it until you feel it, unless you decide to turn your AC off in Texas. And, maybe get some cheese or moldy cheese and let the flies
that's gross,
come.
man. That's
and
gross.
things like that.
I can't believe you'd bring up cheese again.
You
Wow.
can prepare for it, but until you're actually there, the mental and the spiritual, it sounds like being part of a team that is, meeting together, praying together, devotionals together, talking through some of the potential challenges. That's all helpful.
Oh yeah,
and getting you comfortable. No, I don't even want to say comfortable.
It's prepping you. I would say a lot of people don't even do what the things you just said right there. Like that prep is absolutely necessary. It's not because it's going to make it comfortable or make you fully prep for the whole trip. It's just to give you some form of a springboard into what you're stepping into.
Right.
But like you said, until you're actually there, there's only so much you can prep for. It's kind of like a couple with premarital counseling. There's only so far you can go till you actually get married. Then you go, oh, this is marriage. And you start learning a deeper level. Yeah. So like the premarital, man, I'd say is almost like a must for any relationship, but it's only going to go so far.
Yeah. So our church, one of the things that I've seen us, one of the many things that I've seen us do really well over many years, at least almost 2 decades now, has been going on these kinds of trips.
Yeah.
And it's just part of our DNA. I remember even when we were small and, occupying a small room that these were things that we were talking about, and getting outside of your comfort zone. And, if you're going to serve those across the world, then it means going out to them.
Yeah.
And
100%.
So this kind of preparation, it's kind of become something of a norm here of, planning, meeting, preparing. One of the things that I remember prior to going to India, which was, there were a couple trips that my wife and I took to India.
How long ago was your most recent trip?
Oh boy, 2009, I would say.
Okay.
So I haven't been back to India since, but while there, one of the things that we learned prior to, stepping off the plane and, encountering such a huge difference in everything that you could taste, touch, hear, smell, was to say, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So if somebody say, we need to pivot and do something different, then sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Or are we going to do this instead of that? Sounds good to me.
We had a similar phrase of, we were going to say, let's say you were standing in a long line. The phrase would be like, I love long lines. Oh. Like, I wish we could get more long lines kind of for us.
And it helps, right?
Sure.
Because
you're just embracing it.
Yeah. Kind of in advance of facing that situation, you kind of already have a plan to follow.
Yeah.
When things don't go as expected, though, how does that tend to play out when you're
so
even the things you don't prepare for?
Yeah. Well, you're asking kind of a critical question, like, so why uncomfort? Like why is it good, or why should the follower of Jesus embrace being uncomfortable? And what happens when you find that uncomfort? So we go on a trip like this to Honduras, and you're all sorts of outside your comfort zone, and then you're reaching out to people you've never met before, including team members you haven't. You're all living together for a week. You're just, everything's there, and to not embrace it means you're going to fight it. So we're either going to fight something, we're either going to fight discomfort, or we're going to embrace it. And I guess maybe a version of fighting would be running away, but basically you're fighting it. So if you do that on a trip like this, there's nowhere to go. I guess you can say no and kind of sit in a corner and not do anything. But you don't really have a choice. It kind of forces you to step into the uncomfortable, which then, in my opinion, kind of drives the Christian to their knees to pray for the Holy Spirit just to take over, because we're just we cannot do it on our own strength. So there's something to be said of, I would say, the necessity of the Christian to embrace the uncomfortable. Because, I mean, if we take a step back, how would you describe what's comfort?
Really hard to define.
Yeah.
Right. So
if me and you are not embracing being uncomfortable, then what are we doing? I mean,
we're trying to build for ourselves something that we can feel safe in,
I guess,
or something
right?
that doesn't make us have to
be uncomfortable.
Well, yeah. I mean, in general, that's it. But we don't have to decide on things that we don't know about. We don't have to push our bodies to a limit there.
Almost like we have more control. Well, we think we have more control.
I think
so. Comfort.
That's
control.
a great way to define it. Is that we're looking for control, right?
Yeah, and I guess verbally processing it with you right now is
this is all coming to you, listeners. With we're going with the flow right now. So.
Did you feel the need to sidebar that like a little advertisement? Brought to you live, listener. This verbal processing section of our episode.
we are verbal processing.
You also looked over here to the wall. That there's nothing on the wall. Like we just broke the third wall. Hey, listener, thanks for being here. Oh, that got me.
Listener?
No, I know before I was a believer, I was absolutely living for myself. And I guess if you were to break it down, I totally had to be in control because it's like I'm God in that scenario. But I guess also comforts, I don't know why I wouldn't drift towards my comforts. Like, why be uncomfortable? That just sounds stupid. Yeah. I mean, I guess the world will say you'll grow or mature, and like when you give this speech at Toastmasters or when you do a good deed for a random stranger. Like, I guess, but I would say even if I thought that, I don't know, 98% of my day would go towards comforts or me being in control. Yeah. And I still drift that way now, so now as a believer, I don't wake up every day thinking, man, good morning. I really want to be uncomfortable today. Yeah, like, please. I don't know about you. I just,
let's fit that in soon.
Yeah. Breakfast is over. Let's go be uncomfortable, kids. Like I'm never doing that. So I know it makes me face my selfishness. It kind of makes me either embrace or fight it.
Right. In these mission trips, they tend to put a real focus and spotlight on our need for control pretty quickly, right? Because if you're going to a third world country and you're not sure what the water situation is going to be or the food situation or how you're going to sleep, then you might carry into that mission trip some plans.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I need to have this. I need to bring this particular pillow. I need to bring this particular food because I'm not going to eat anything there. Or, or just being worried about things that kind of take away from.
Sure.
Do you find that that's part of the trip too? Or was that pretty common?
I think everyone experiences that in different ways. So let's take a couple different examples. So someone might be scared about the sleep. So they might bring a whole bunch of drugs with them thinking I'm going to just load up when I go to sleep with a bunch of over-the-counter. I'm talking about legal drugs, by the way.
I don't know, Mike.
We're going down the legal.
And drugs. And
over-the-counter, OTC. Someone may think about that. Someone does bring some snacks. They're worried about their food. They're worried if water touches their skin, they might get really sick. Others are terrified of the language barrier, where they might only know Donde está Maria and they don't know anything else. So they're maybe afraid to talk. I think what you see, and I'm not the expert, I've done a good handful or a little bit more of trips. There's people out there who've done like 50 plus mission trips. But what I see as a general consensus is, let's call it, on this trip, we had 16 people. You get 16 people who show up, who have 16 different views on how it's going to go. No one's right. No one's got it down perfect. But by the end of the trip, hopefully most of everyone, and everyone did on this team, which was awesome, leans into the Lord, embraces the uncomfortableness, and then they open their hands and they allow God to use them all. We had 16 different people used in 16 different ways with their skills and abilities, where by the end of the trip, the confidence in the Lord was through the roof. And that can't happen, though, without some element of letting go, which I would probably say to the average person, maybe it's about day 1 or day 2. It's like, okay, we're here. I got to embrace it. And it's time to let go. One story about that for me that I realized I was not expecting this. So this is also public confession time. There's a lot of Mike confession times on this podcast. Where are all your confessions?
I think it's where the people what they want.
I know the people want both confessions. We need a Chris confession time. A Chris confessional.
This wasn't recently?
In the future. Well, yeah, well, whatever. Sometimes you're honest. Just kidding. I wanted to see if people could only see the face you're giving me right now. It's like, where is this coming from?
To Mike?
Dear listener, this is also the time that co-host Chris and I verbally get in a punching match over the microphone.
Well, I just, talking about a kidney stone, I guess, is not not personal enough.
Apparently, it's not enough.
Or lack of sales.
We need more.
But we'll push it a little bit more.
More
for the people, right? For the people.
No, one thing that I was not expecting was, man, this sounds so bad saying it. So we're serving with kids, like our own kids. Never happened before. And there was a couple times I had to pull one of my kids aside, and I would just say some selfishness was coming out of them, like it does any of us, adult or child. Honestly, they were getting uncomfortable. So what was coming out of them were some complaints. And while I'm pulling them aside to address that and trying to do it in a loving way, I'm feeling frustrated because I feel like it's a distraction to the mission, what's going on. And I know the Lord was telling me in that moment that I was being just as selfish on getting frustrated. I was missing the bigger picture. So, for example, where the Lord was the whole mission, like, from the 30,000 foot view, included what we were doing on the ground, and it included discipleship of my children at the same time. But for some weird reason that we've talked about this, I'm still kind of struggling with it. I tend to separate them. And I was getting frustrated in that separation. So by about day 2, I had to also let that go and go, okay, I don't quite get this. It's not comfortable for me. I've never done this. I feel split almost in a way, split focus. But it's like, no, wait a minute. This is all part of it. Like, this is all part of the trip. And that's okay. It'd be the same thing if maybe you were in India and there's a detour and you had plan A on the docket, but then you had to take a detour and you had to focus over here on the side on a whole nother issue that had nothing to do with the original plan. Well, that's what God had in mind.
Yeah.
And so it's the relinquishing control, which we've talked about on here's our agenda, here's our schedule, here's our priorities, and saying, okay, but wait a minute, God, let's make sure they are your priorities and agenda.
Sounds good to me.
Right. And if they're not, then I don't want to do it. But we don't tend to let that go easily. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. And it's good of you to recognize that too. And I think that really helps for any type of future mission trip or anything else that just takes you out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a mission
trip. It doesn't have to be the way that I'm picturing it.
Mm-hmm.
What is the main goal here? What's the thing to be learned? What's the thing that God is trying to show me? And that tends to take a bit of the pressure off of you, I would say, too, about...
I think so. I think when you finally let it go, I think the process of... I just envision opening your hands. I think the process of opening your hands is really difficult. I think by the time they're open, like they're flat out open...
Mike is opening his hands right now.
I am opening my hands for the listener. Thank you, listener. I think when you open your hands, the pressure does actually go off. I think that's when you know you've given over to the Lord, honestly. The pressure releases... And you're like, okay, whatever it is we're going to do. But until you get there, I think it's a tough process. Like, do you find yourself naturally drifting towards comfort, like afraid of stepping into the uncomfortable?
Definitely. I would say that's just, I'll just go from my perspective on that is that you want to find a place where you can make decisions based on what you know. And part of that is having control over things, or at least perceived control over things.
Yeah. Where you think you have it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like what you're talking about here as far as the open hands, because it's an exercise, right? The more that you do
Yes.
that, the more that your hands tend to open when you're facing other situations.
Yeah.
And we've
Yeah.
definitely seen, especially in our circle here around 121, again, not a pitch for 121, but it's a pitch for 121 because it's a great place. We've had a lot of friends who have gone and lived overseas.
Yeah.
Tough situations, definitely pushed them out and their families out of their comfort zone. And, to see them in that particular environment when we've gone to visit them and see what they've been able to acclimate to and what became their new normal. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
And that's a process of them continuously opening up their hands and, taking on those new challenges. And, you see that even back today when they return to the States or they're on their next assignment, that they keep those hands opening.
Yeah. And sometimes we visit them and we're almost shocked, or we're really admirable of where they've gotten to, which is great, and praise God for that. And it deserves that admiration. But what we probably don't see is the day-to-day of learning to open the hands, almost like the darker, quiet days when no one's really watching you and you're just wrestling, right? Like you're just gripping onto something and then kind of letting go, and you grab it back, or you try to run away while you're holding it, just, it's just that huge battle. Like I've had that with public speaking. I've had that like with preaching before. Terribly uncomfortable on public speaking, which is funny. People assume that I would love public speaking, I guess because of acting and things like that.
Right.
No. Public speaking or preaching is, for me, incredibly challenging. But it has required me this is for me, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but to kind of get over myself, let the worries go of how it's going to go or how I'm going to be perceived, the performer side of me, whatever, and go, okay, God wants me to speak, and I'm going to speak his word. He's just talking through me. I'm just going to be faithful to that, and the results are up to him. And that's a process. But then, like you said, there's been tremendous freedom when I finally get there. I have to do it every single time to go, okay. And then God does it. And then there we go. But I have to still go through that process.
Yeah.
And like I said, it is an exercise, but it's a very challenging exercise. And it makes me wonder, for us and for anyone, for those of you listening, what is something right now that you are holding on to? Or right now, when we say, what would make you uncomfortable? Like, what's a step of obedience that would make you uncomfortable? Chances are you just thought of a subject, or you just thought of maybe something on the table for you right now, and you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about this. Because we don't get
the
a chance
very thing that you're being called to do.
Yeah, we don't get to hear your public confession. Although you could always call us in and leave a message and let us know. But yeah, that would make me think, when you're like, you know what, I think I would never want to do blank. That might be what the Lord's calling you to do.
It just might be. And keeping those hands open.
Yeah.
Continuously asking. And then you touch on something here too that I think is worth exploring. You mentioned, okay, what might people think in that regard too?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that can be pretty powerful. What is somebody going to say, or what are they going to say when they find out that I'm going to do this? You might fear somebody detracting you from it.
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
Hey, why do you want to do this?
I think you're a weirdo,
right?
Or that you are not fit for the thing that we're talking about.
Yeah. So thinking that it's not going to work out, or that you're not going to get support in it, that could be a real, I don't know, it could be a hindrance there between what God's calling you to do and something that you have to work through. How have you worked through that before?
I think without spending a considerable amount of time with Jesus. I'm talking I talked about this with one of the translators, actually, in Honduras. He has a history of being brought up with a lot of rules, like similar to me, I think, with the Catholic Church. This is my experience. I'm not saying for everyone with the Catholic Church, but my experience was a lot of rules, a lot of regulation. To think about a relationship with Jesus, that was not talked about in my circles. Okay. It was the same thing for him. And so he was a believer as of about a year ago. and he's still learning, okay, I can grow in my walk with Jesus as like a friend or like as a son to a father. Like there's an actual relationship there to be had. He's still learning that, which we all still learning that. If we're not developing our relationship with Jesus, I don't know how to do what you just said. I don't know how to do this, because what if someone asked me to go to Honduras, as an example, go on a mission trip? Unless I know the Lord is leading me that direction, man, I don't think I'm going to say yes to anything that's uncomfortable.
Sure.
Like what would my motivation be in my flesh to say yes to the uncomfortable things? I think in my spirit and with the Holy Spirit leading me, I would say yes more often. But there's no way I can do that without spending time with Jesus, right?
Right.
You're just getting the opinions of others, or it's your own flesh leading the way. There's no way we're going to step into the uncomfortable on the norm, I think, without Jesus leading the way.
No, I mean, that's where we get our confidence, and that's where we also maybe get a clearer picture, because I know we can certainly conjure up images of, okay, it's going to go this way, or, just think negatively about what it's going to look like, and you're not get an accurate picture, and maybe even psych yourself out a little bit about, okay, well, if I speak, then this could go wrong or that could go wrong. If I'm asked to do this and speak in front of these people, and maybe miss out on the opportunities there too.
Or your confidence can be misplaced in yourself, and you go, well, I'm awesome, so I'm going to do amazing at this uncomfortable thing. And you're kind of the idol at that point. And then you look down on others to bulldoze over them because you're willing to be the uncomfortable person. Well, that's one way of doing it. And I think some people step through the uncomfortable with that kind of confidence. But at the end of the day, and I would challenge anyone on this conversation, I think you're still feeling empty when that's done.
Sure.
Like you may feel accomplished, but I think by the time you go home, there's something to be said that's not fulfilling, which could be the same case on chasing our comforts. You might love eating the Cheetos, the crunchy Cheetos, by the way. No, maybe in this case, it'd be the puffy Cheetos.
Yeah,
could be a little lazier.
It all applies.
So you love eating the Cheeto. At the end of the day, you're not feeling good about it. Like, even if you say you're feeling good, man, you're just like a facade. You're not feeling good about that. So it's like, how far can you go chasing the comforts and knowing they're just not satisfied? How many athletes or celebrities or articles do we have to read where someone gets this many millions of dollars, this many marriages, this many possessions, and they all say the same thing? They get to the top of this quote mountain and they say, I realized I'm not satisfied here.
Yeah, we have to read 10 articles in order to understand that each, but you're right.
Yeah.
It doesn't satisfy.
I don't think so.
And not everybody is going to just rush out and go on a mission trip, right?
No,
so they're not going to face something to this level, but they are going to face things every day.
Sure.
And they're going to have that siren's call to say, stay in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Don't speak up. There in the meeting, don't take that opportunity. Don't try for that new position.
Sure.
They're going to run into all sorts of different things. So what would you say to the person who's just going to go to work tomorrow and not go to Honduras?
That's a good question. I was going to ask you that question, but you asked me first. So I guess I have to answer first.
Put you in an uncomfortable situation.
Oh, hey, a live opportunity. And I better embrace it.
You're folding your arms like I am.
I better embrace it.
Yeah. Okay.
I would encourage someone, and this is, I have to do everything I'm saying here too, to spend time with the Lord, read his word, pray, especially as you start the day, but all throughout the day. And the only reason I'm saying that, it's not to oversimplify things. It's just, you got to be in tune with Jesus to be able to know what in the world he's even saying to you or how he's leading you. So on your workplace, for example, I think you got to spend time with the Lord. And then I think if you look at each day to go, okay, fresh perspective, tomorrow is whatever day of the week. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to open my hands and I'm going to go to work with my hands open. I firmly believe if we were to be that intentional with our day, we would notice a lot more and we would see some curveballs with intentionality behind them to go, ooh, I think actually this is what the Lord's doing, and kind of embrace it. Because, when you go on a trip, You're out of your surroundings. You've literally transplanted to another area around the world. So you don't have a choice but to wake up and go, okay, this is day 2 or this is day 3. My hands are open. What are we doing today? In reality, that's actually our everyday lives now. And that's something I'm trying to learn post this trip is why can't I just wake up today with the exact same mindset?
Yeah.
And go, and I know it's probably because of my rhythms, my schedule, my family, my responsibilities, or my distractions, or whatever that's here. But isn't it the same principle? We wake up and go, okay, God, what do we have today? So I think just even asking that question as we go to work, even starting in our commute, I think that makes a massive difference.
Sounds like a great start.
I mean,
a great question to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Like what, Lord, what would you have me do today? Like specifically today, I'm going to be in this office, or I'm going to be on this phone call, or I'm going to be on this Zoom, or I'm going to stay at home and have this time with kids, or whatever it is. I'm going to be at school, but it's like, God, you know that. So what would you have me do today? In that posture of open hands, even physically open your hands in the morning, pray like that.
So if that meeting gets canceled, or if something happens to where, it doesn't start out the way you thought, or even end up the way that you thought the day was going to go, your hands are open and God may have surprised you with something completely different.
Yeah. Chances are that you're frustrated or you're wondering, you're having me looking around. Okay, stop, pray, open your hands.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to oversimplify. It's just what comes to mind on a simple way we can ask God, what are you asking me to do? Especially the uncomfortable things that will make me depend on you even more, because that's going to be the best thing for us.
What do you say to the person who says, okay, well, if that's the case, then you should chase discomfort. You should look for discomfort around every bend and say, if I'm not uncomfortable, then I'm not doing it right.
Yeah. So that's a popular mindset. So some people will say, Mike, that's great. You went to Honduras. So why don't you go to like Honduras every day, or go live in a village out in the middle of nowhere and sell all of your possessions and do all that. And like you said, you should be uncomfortable all the time. And if you're never feeling uncomfortable, you're completely disobedient. I'm not going to say that there isn't a time that the Lord may say, sell your things and move here or there. But I would probably question the motivation at the end of the day. If it's chasing discomfort for discomfort, okay. Is the Lord calling you to do that? I don't see the call on the church at large for every single person to do the same. In fact, it's all these different members of the same body. So if you just think body parts, a right ear is going to be different than a left elbow. Yeah. So I would sometimes probably question the motivation. Again, not saying that maybe an answer doesn't look like that, but I know people that they chase the poverty for the sake of poverty, and I think we're missing the mark. And I'm trying to say that humbly, with grace, but I think that person's kind of missing the wrong motivation. Again, what is the Lord leading you to do? And if the answer is, I don't know, then I think you need to spend some more time in that relationship. And if it's like, well, I still don't know, and I spend time, it's like, okay, take a breath, open your hands, take the pressure off yourself. Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden's light, to give rest to the weary. God's not in the business of trying to frustrate someone and keep them frustrated while they're looking for him. He's right there knocking on the door. So most of the time that's us getting frustrated in what we think is time with the Lord and he should deliver to us, versus a posture of hands open, Jesus, have your way with me today, and just being open for that.
Yeah, it really seems like you're giving room for God to speak to you in that type of relationship where you're not holding on to anything. You're not saying it has to be this way and it has to fit what I perceive and how things have to happen. But God, what do you have for me? And that's an everyday thing too, right? Because, we're not supposed to spend too much time in the past. we're not supposed to spend too much time in the future, but given that present day,
Yeah.
giving over our schedule, giving over our
Yeah.
hopes, giving over our dreams, giving over even, what's best for our family, not knowing
Yeah.
exactly what's the best for them, and asking God to, have them keep their hands open.
Yeah.
What a great prayer for that.
Yeah.
Or what a great opportunity to pray that in that time.
100%.
So
It makes me think of the disciples. You imagine the disciples with Jesus for 3 years. They stepped into every uncomfortable position known to man. They complained about it. They asked questions about it. They often got the situation wrong, but they went through it. They continued to see how to trust Jesus more. And then Jesus leaves, Holy Spirit comes, the church starts growing, the gospel starts spreading. They're different people years and years into it, learning how to keep their hands open, being used. And look where we are today. I mean, you and I, or anyone listening, we wouldn't know anything about Jesus without them being faithful in the uncomfortable,
right.
like them embracing the uncomfortable. So that would have to mean this year, 2024, there are things God's asking us to do that's uncomfortable. I mean, man, we haven't. I hate to. We're obligated. We're followers of Jesus. We've given over our rights. Like, we've got to step into that. There's so much bigger things that are at stake, not because of us, but just worldwide, that the Lord's accomplishing in Honduras or in Texas or in the U.S. That embracing the uncomfortable is not just good for us. It's better for everyone. Right? It gives even more people the chance to know and follow Jesus.
Yeah, you're right. And one of the things that I know that can kind of cloud the message too is that, okay, if anything is, if it resembles spending time yourself on something that you enjoy, or luxury, or maybe it's a nice car, or it's a media room in your house, and those things aren't inherently bad.
No.
So what would you say to the person that says, okay, well, why aren't you spending it on something else? Why aren't you giving that media room money over to missions? So take us there.
Man, that's fine. Just tackle that one little topic. And it's a big topic.
It's on you, buddy.
I'm never going to look.
Discomfort.
I'm never going to look at someone. So for example, let's take the fancy car. Let's see. We're looking at someone who has a Tesla. It's a $90K car, whatever. Right? Different things may pop in your brain when you see someone driving one of those. Okay, that person might be a millionaire and be the most generous person ever, and they also have a Tesla. Right? We can be just as selfish or stingy whether or not we have a Tesla. So I'm not gonna look at the person. Doesn't mean I'm not tempted to at times, but I gotta kill it. I'm not gonna look and make judgment calls on someone's motivation. I don't know where someone's at. And so I think having a media room can be amazingly godly. It can also be the most selfish thing in the universe. But it's not because it's the media room. It's the heart behind it, the motivation, the use of it for the glory of God or not. Like, what's the ultimate goal with it? And God's given us desires and preferences and things that I think can stir our affections for the Lord, honestly, and even through some of our possessions. And so you can't write them all off for the sake of that. You have the widow given 2 pennies, and people complaining, and Lord going, she's given more out of her 2 pennies than so many of you who have given so much more. It's a heart motivation at the end of the day. So it's, we got to be careful, and we do this, and social media is terrible for it. We judge the person on the outside, just like the Pharisees did. And Jesus is like, you judge on the outside of the cup. We know, what about the inside of the cup? What about the heart behind that? So I think, what you're getting at is maybe even judging the comfort. And I don't think that's not on us. I can't, Chris, I can't even look at you and judge your comforts. You could eat a block of cheese, and that could be God glorifying.
That's going to be uncomfortable.
Or it could be the most
quickly.
selfish person. The Summer of George might be somehow godly, but also might be terribly selfish. I mean, I don't know. I know there are times that Joelle and I will press into the Lord. We know He's told us to do blank, and we move forward with confidence. And 100% of the time, not everyone's going to agree with us.
Yeah.
That's okay. But also, I only grow in that confidence if I know the Lord's told us to do it. If I didn't lean into the Lord, the first person who's uncomfortable with what we're doing would make me start questioning what I'm doing.
Sure.
If someone came around and said, why would you take your family to Honduras? Don't you know about this or that? If I didn't know the Lord was telling us to do it, I'd probably not go into Honduras because I got some resistance from someone. I don't know. It's just that that's such a crucial thing. So we can't judge the other person. We've got to press into the Lord. I just know, and the last thing I'll say, because I know we're going to wrap up as soon as, I know in my little bit of experience in my walk, the times I've probably been the most uncomfortable are 99% of the times the Lord's telling me to do something. And it's probably for my own development and to die to my own selfishness. Likewise, when I'm in a scenario and I'm looking around thinking, I wonder why someone's not doing this or that. It is, again, 99% of the time, it's the Lord telling me to do it while I'm looking around, which a lot of us ask, what is the Lord calling me to do? I don't know. I would ask you, you and anyone listening, what are the things that you're most uncomfortable with? Or what are the things that you keep wondering why other Christians aren't doing it around you? I feel pretty confident it's possible, very strongly possible, the Lord might be tapping you to do it, which is why you can't get it out of your head.
That's a very valid point. I would say.
That's such a long pause.
It is. One of those things where you're thinking, yes, I agree with you. And then on top of that, being obedient to what God is calling you to do.
Yeah.
You have to have your hands open each day.
Yes.
You have to keep them open, keep opening them. And confession. Here's a confession for you.
Oh, here we go.
It's very easy to judge what others are doing. And I've done that.
Me too.
For my own comfort. To say, okay, well, now I can understand that because it seems like they are, not doing this well in other areas. And so it makes me feel better about myself. But guess what? I'm not comfortable in that, staying in that kind of way of thinking, because ultimately well, God, are you pushing me out? Are you wanting me to do something more? Because staying here and thinking like this is not very helpful, and it's not doing anything for you.
Well, it's the curse of comparison, right? Comparison the comparison is never a win. It's a lose-lose. You either end up being better than the person or the thing you're comparing yourself to, so you're going to get cocky, or you think you're less than, and then you're going to dwell in that guilt. And so both are not looking at the Lord at all. Like both is looking at it, right? So like any comparison, I'm just as guilty. I do it every single day. Probably did it an hour ago. I'll probably do it 5 minutes from now. It is always a lose. There's nothing godly that comes out of that.
Nothing helpful from that.
Right? No. Okay, so what would be, as we wrap up, what do you think is a takeaway for us?
I think what we've been talking about here is keeping our hands open, being available, and not having it be what we picture.
Yeah.
Or the results being what we need to have happen.
Yeah.
But really asking God to, show us.
Show us as we step through being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and just to be comfortable with not being comfortable.
Ooh, good line. That should maybe be a title.
Coming to you soon, folks.
What do you think about that for a title?
Yeah, let's do that.
You want to go get some cheese after this?
Fine, we're going to have a block of cheese.
Thanks so much for joining us. Please consider rating and reviewing our podcast and hitting subscribe on whichever platform you prefer. Remember to keep moving forward because we're not quite there.